Millionaire marries overweight woman on a bet, but falls in love with her when... Before the story begins, comment below which city you're watching the video from. We love getting to know our viewers. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss more exciting stories. Enjoy the story and see you soon. The night was at its peak in Miguel Torres's mansion. The sound of music filled the air, as did the loud laughter and conversations among elegantly dressed people. Miguel, impressive in his designer suit, glided through the hall, greeting acquaintances and provoking laughter with his characteristic charm. He was used to being the center of attention. He was a powerful, magnetic man, and he knew it. Beside him, Artur, his longtime friend, observed him with a perceptive gaze. Artur knew Miguel like no one else, aware of his virtues and especially his flaws. In a moment of relaxation, with a smile that blended amusement and provocation, Artur made a bet that would have sounded absurd to anyone else. "Miguel, tell me, do you think you could spend 6 months with a woman who doesn't fit your beauty standards?" Artur said, provoking. Miguel laughed, unbothered. It sounded almost like a joke. He was a man who could have whoever he wanted, always choosing what he considered the best. What kind of challenge would that be for him? "You think I couldn't do it?" Miguel shot back, raising his eyebrows defiantly. For the first time that evening, Artur looked at him seriously. "I don't think you'd stand it living with someone who isn't a trophy. You're used to attracting people who are dazzled by your world, but what if it were the opposite? What if that person didn't care about your money, your charm, or anything else you offer?" Miguel's smile faded, giving way to an intrigued look. He knew Artur's challenge was a blow to his pride, and maybe that was why he considered it, absurd as it was. What would he lose by trying? "All right, Artur, I accept your challenge," Miguel replied, a daring gleam in his eyes. "And I already know who it'll be with." Artur raised an eyebrow, curious. "Camila Rojas. Ever heard of her? A simple, independent woman. She doesn't impress easily. I think it'll be interesting." The name made Artur furrow his brow in surprise. He knew enough about Camila to understand she wasn't the kind of woman Miguel was used to. She was straightforward, facing life with a disconcerting lightness, but with an unbreakable strength. "Careful, Miguel. Camila isn't like the others. She won't be impressed by what you usually use to win people over," Artur warned, though his friend seemed oblivious to the caution in his tone. Miguel shrugged, as if it didn't matter. "I'll prove I can do it," he replied confidently. And so Miguel stepped into the challenge, unaware of how much it would change his life. By the very next day, he arranged a way to meet with Camila, determined to make her accept his outrageous proposal. Miguel met Camila Rojas at a quiet cafe in the city center. The choice of location was intentional. He wanted to impress her with simplicity, not with the luxury he was accustomed to. When she entered, he immediately sensed he was in the presence of someone different. Camila exuded a rare confidence and a gaze that seemed to see beyond appearances. She sat across from him, crossing her arms, observing him silently. Miguel smiled, used to controlling conversations, but was taken aback by her reserved demeanor, showing no hint of awe or nervousness. "Thank you for accepting my invitation, Camila," he began, his voice calculatedly soft. "It's not every day a millionaire businessman asks me for coffee," Camila replied, a touch of sarcasm in her smile. "But I'm curious. What exactly do you want?" Miguel leaned in, as if sharing a secret. "I have an unusual proposal for you. I know it sounds strange, but I'm looking for a commitment." Camila let out a disbelieving laugh, clearly finding the idea absurd. "You're suggesting I enter into a commitment with you? We don't know each other. What kind of commitment would that be?" "A marriage, actually," Miguel replied, his tone serious, though he maintained the charm that usually worked well with other women. Camilla's laughter stopped immediately. She looked at him, trying to discern if this was some kind of joke. But Miguel's face remained impassive, showing he was serious. "Are you proposing marriage?" Camilla asked, surprised. Miguel nodded, his gaze fixed on her. He explained that it would be a marriage of convenience, with mutual benefits but no emotional involvement. He left out the part about his bet with Arthur, choosing to keep his real motive a secret. By the end of his explanation, Camilla regarded him with a mix of curiosity and skepticism. "Why would I agree to something like that?" she asked, challenging him. "I know it's unexpected, but it might interest you. Your independence wouldn't be affected, and you could continue living your life as you choose," Miguel said, trying to persuade her. "And while I know you're not impressed by money, there would be financial compensation that might help with some of your projects." Camilla kept her gaze steady, and Miguel could tell she was giving it serious thought. After a few seconds, she sighed and crossed her arms. "I'll accept on one condition," she declared. "I want no interference in my personal space, no attempts to impress me with parties or luxuries. I need respect and privacy." Surprised by her positive response, Miguel extended his hand, sealing the agreement with a firm handshake. He didn't know exactly what had motivated Camilla to accept, but he was satisfied. To him, the challenge now seemed easier than he had imagined. As they said their goodbyes, Camilla walked away without looking back, leaving Miguel with a feeling of intrigue. This woman didn't fit into any of the molds he was used to, and that was beginning to affect him in ways he didn't yet understand. Little did he know that behind this decision lay a story that would forever change the course of his life. The wedding took place discreetly, just as Camilla had insisted. No lavish ceremony, no distinguished guests, just a signature at the courthouse, with no parties or celebrations. For Miguel, this was a stark contrast to his lifestyle, but he was determined to keep his word, convinced that it wouldn't be long before Camilla would yield to his charm. He believed it was only a matter of time before she would be captivated by the comfort and opulence he could provide. As soon as they moved into Miguel's mansion, he tried to subtly impress her. He knew she didn't like ostentation, but still he made a point of preparing an elegant room decorated with the finest design pieces. However, when she saw it, Camilla thanked him politely and immediately requested it be simplified. "I prefer something lighter, Miguel. I don't need all of this to feel comfortable," she said firmly. Each day, Miguel found himself faced with a woman who seemed immune to the allure of wealth. Camilla maintained her own independent routine, going out to work and returning without any hurry to interact with him. She spent most of her time in her makeshift office, dedicated to her projects and studies. The house felt quieter, almost unsettling, and Miguel began to realize he wasn't in control of the situation as he had assumed. One evening, Miguel decided to take a more direct approach. He prepared a candlelit dinner, creating a warm and inviting atmosphere. When Camilla arrived home, she was greeted by the aroma of a meal prepared especially for her. Initially, he saw a hint of surprise, but instead of being dazzled, she merely smiled and thanked him. "You didn't have to go through all that trouble, Miguel. I really don't seek these things. I'm fine with simplicity." Her straightforward response left Miguel at a loss. He had never known someone who remained unimpressed by extravagance, and it made him question his own methods. Sitting at the table, he watched Camilla intently, trying to find a crack in her ever-confident and distant demeanor. After a few minutes of silence, Camilla turned to him with a perceptive gaze. "Miguel, I know you're used to living in a world of appearances, but that doesn't interest me. I don't want you acting as if you need to please me. For me, this is an agreement, and I don't need anything beyond what we settled on." Her frankness both irritated and fascinated him. Miguel, always accustomed to control, felt vulnerable. For the first time, he realized that this woman was different from anyone else he had ever known, and perhaps the challenge was more than just proving something to Artur. Miguel chose to remain silent that night, respecting the boundary Camila had set. But deep down, he knew he was just beginning to feel intrigued by her. His wounded pride and growing curiosity intertwined, transforming what had initially been a mere bet into a mystery he was eager to unravel. As the days passed, Miguel found himself thinking more and more about Camila. He began noticing small details about her that fascinated him, the way she treated those around her, the independence radiating from every gesture, and the ease with which she handled situations. While the silence between them persisted, Miguel felt that, for the first time, he was living with someone who made him question his own way of life. This beginning of their marriage wasn't what he had planned, but somehow he was starting to realize it might be exactly what he needed. Miguel decided he needed a new strategy. Camila seemed unshakable and determined to keep her distance, so he resolved to test the limits of her indifference in a bolder way. To do so, he organized a social event at his mansion, inviting influential business figures, wealthy friends, and public personalities. It would be a party filled with all the opulence and glamour he was so skilled at creating, and he believed that this time, Camila wouldn't be able to ignore the grandeur of his world. On the night of the event, Camila descended the mansion stairs wearing a simple yet elegant dress, standing out against the extravagant attire of the guests around her. She observed everything calmly, looking somewhat out of place, but showing no signs of discomfort. Miguel approached her, taking the opportunity to introduce her to some of his contacts and trying to engage Camila in the animated conversations and displays of wealth filling the atmosphere. However, Camila maintained her calm, reserved demeanor. When she began to notice the superficiality of the conversations and the excessive interest the guests had in Miguel and his money, she started to feel suffocated. At a certain point, during an exchange of exaggerated laughter and empty compliments, she turned to Miguel, visibly uncomfortable. "These are the friends you choose to surround yourself with?" she asked in a low but firm tone. Miguel raised his eyebrows, surprised by the reproach in her voice. He tried to discern whether it was provocation or a sincere critique. "What's the problem, Camila? It's just a party, and these people are part of my social circle. I hoped you'd enjoy the evening by my side," he replied, trying to ease her discomfort. Camila sighed, exasperated, her eyes reflecting a mix of weariness and frustration. "I'm not like them, Miguel. I can't stand here pretending to care about what these people think or about the luxury businesses they're so eager to boast about. This environment makes no sense to me, and I thought that was clear from the beginning." Camila's honesty had an unexpected impact on Miguel. Accustomed to a circle of people who flattered him and agreed with everything he said, her frankness felt like a reality check. He felt exposed, but at the same time intrigued. Here was a woman who didn't hesitate to confront him, and somehow this challenged him to understand what was happening in his own heart. The rest of the night was tense. Camila excused herself, going upstairs and ending her participation in the event. Miguel, meanwhile, spent the remainder of the party with an empty feeling, as if the grandeur around him had lost its meaning. He began to realize that, despite having everything money could buy, he might be surrounded by things that held no real value. After the last guest had departed, Miguel climbed the stairs to his room, still reflecting on Camila's blunt words. He found her sitting on the bed, reading a book, unaffected by the bustle from earlier. When she noticed his presence, she looked up, and a silence settled between them. "You know, Miguel, I really thought you understood why I accepted this arrangement. If this is what you want, if you want someone to smile and pretend to be dazzled by this world, I'm not that person," she said, her tone firm and sincere. Miguel swallowed hard. Her words stung, but he knew she was right. For the first time, he was forced to confront the possibility that his lifestyle might not be as perfect as he'd always believed. And that night, he lay down with a restlessness he had never felt before. Weeks passed, and the tension between Miguel and Camila only grew. She continued to keep her distance, making it clear she wasn't willing to make concessions to please him. Miguel, in turn, grew increasingly frustrated, struggling in vain to understand why Camila rejected everything he offered, keeping him at arm's length. One particularly silent evening, after a dinner that passed with hardly a word exchanged, Camila rose from the table and stepped outside to the garden, seeking fresh air. Determined to confront her about the coldness between them, Miguel followed. He found her seated on a bench, gazing at the stars with a serene yet somber expression. "Camila, I don't understand you," he said, exhaling tiredly. "Since the beginning, you've kept yourself distant, indifferent. I've tried to reach out to connect with you, but you push me away every time." Camila looked at him in silence, as if weighing her words. Then she took a deep breath, as if about to reveal something profound. "Maybe it's time for you to know why I accepted this arrangement, Miguel." Miguel fell silent, surprised by the intensity in her gaze. He sensed this conversation wasn't just a trivial explanation, but a revelation that would change everything. "Years ago, your company bought my family's store in a ruthless acquisition. For you, it was just another business deal, but for us, it meant losing our livelihood, our history. My mother's health deteriorated after that, and my brother, Gustavo, couldn't handle the blow. He distanced himself from the family, hurt and full of resentment," she said, her voice heavy with pain. Miguel froze, feeling a weight he never anticipated bearing. He vaguely remembered that acquisition, a small store purchased during his company's expansion. To him, it was just another transaction. But now, seeing the impact it had on Camila's life, he felt a sharp pang of guilt hitting him squarely. I had no idea," he murmured, his voice strained. Camila continued, showing no sympathy for Miguel's shock. "Of course you didn't. You didn't care. You just wanted to expand your business. But to me, that's your true face, Miguel. A man who destroys what he doesn't know and cares only about his own success." Her words hit Miguel like an avalanche. He'd always considered himself successful, someone who had built an empire through hard work. But he had never thought about the lives that might have been affected along the way. Having Camila lay it out so clearly and honestly was like facing a distorted reflection of himself. "Camila, I'm sorry. If I'd known..." He tried to justify himself, but realized that any words would sound hollow. She shook her head, refusing any apology. "I don't want your apologies, Miguel. I accepted this arrangement so you could see up close the effects of your decisions. You may be very good at hiding the consequences of your actions behind numbers and contracts, but the scars you left on my life and my family's are real and deep." Miguel stood there silent, facing Camila as the weight of guilt grew within him. Camila's revelation dismantled his entire perception of himself. He had never considered the impact his business choices might have had on other lives. In that moment, he realized he was facing not only a personal challenge, but an emotional debt he could never simply pay off with money. That night was a turning point for Miguel. As he walked back to his room, he felt stripped of the arrogance that had always accompanied him. He began to understand that to redeem himself, he would have to look inward and confront truths he had long avoided. Throughout the quiet hours of that night, Miguel resolved that he needed to do something about it, though he had no idea where to begin or how to make amends. Camila's words continued to echo in Miguel's mind, days after their conversation in the garden. Every time he tried to focus on work or engage in his usual activities, it was as if a shadow followed him, reminding him of the weight of his actions. Camila's resentment and the pain he had caused her family haunted him like an invisible but deep wound. The decision to change something in his life began to take shape, yet Miguel still felt lost on how to take the first step. Then he remembered Alice, a close friend of Camilla's and a psychologist. He knew Camilla trusted Alice deeply, and perhaps she could help him understand what was going on inside him. The next day, he arranged to meet Alice at a quiet cafe. She greeted him with a serious and inquisitive look, without any trace of warmth or sympathy. Miguel felt the weight of her judgment and knew it would be a challenge to open up. "Miguel, I'll be direct," Alice began, without preamble. "Camilla is my friend, and I don't like seeing her suffer. If you called me here to justify yourself, I'm not interested." Miguel took a deep breath, feeling the full force of Alice's disapproval, but he was determined to try. "I'm not here to justify anything, Alice. I want to understand. I want to know what I can do to, in some way, try to make up for what I've caused." Alice watched him closely, as if she were evaluating the sincerity in his words. After a moment of silence, she took a deep breath and began to speak. "Miguel, change requires more than words. You've always been surrounded by people who didn't question your choices, who applauded your success and ignored its impact on others. It's hard to undo a lifetime of selfishness and indifference, but it's not impossible. If you really want to do something meaningful, you need to start questioning what you truly value." Miguel listened attentively, absorbing each word. He knew Alice was right. He had always lived in a world where power and money were the main drivers, and his own sense of worth was limited to what he could control and flaunt. But faced with Camilla's truth, he was beginning to see the emptiness behind it all. "So, where do I start?" he asked with a disarming sincerity. Alice looked at him, seeing for the first time a glimmer of genuine remorse. "Start by helping those in need. Use what you have to make a difference, not to gain more power. You might not be able to erase what you did, but you can prevent other families from going through what Camilla's did." The conversation with Alice was like a spark for Miguel. He returned home determined to initiate something concrete. In the days that followed, he began to look into small local businesses struggling financially. Unlike his traditional operations, this time he wasn't interested in acquisitions or profits, but in genuine support. With each step, Miguel encountered internal resistance from his old mindset, which always sought an immediate return in everything he did. However, he kept his focus on Alice's advice, trying to transform his guilt into a force for something positive. To his surprise, he began to find a certain relief in his new efforts. Camilla, however, remained skeptical. She observed Miguel with cautious distance, as if waiting for the moment he would revert to the selfish man she knew. One quiet evening over dinner, she confronted him again. "Don't think you can erase the past with one or two good deeds, Miguel. The pain you caused doesn't disappear with money." Miguel nodded, feeling the weight of her words, but he was prepared to face whatever came. "I'm not doing this to impress you, Camilla. I'm doing it because I realize something in me needs to change. Maybe I'll never fully make up for what I've done, but I want to at least try." Camilla's gaze softened briefly, but she held her firm stance. Miguel knew it would take time, perhaps a very long time, for her to believe in his intentions, and he was willing to wait. That night marked the beginning of a personal journey for Miguel. For the first time, he wasn't just trying to prove something to someone. He was trying to find something within himself he had never known. The news that Gustavo, Camilla's brother, had returned to the city came unexpectedly to Miguel. Camilla mentioned it casually over breakfast, without giving many details, but Miguel noticed the nervousness in her eyes. Gustavo represented painful memories, an open wound that time hadn't healed. And now, he was back, bringing the weight of the past with him. Determined to make amends, Miguel asked Camilla to arrange a meeting between him and Gustavo, hoping to apologize in person. Camilla hesitated, seemingly unsure of his intentions. However, seeing the sincerity in his request, she agreed, but with one condition. If Gustavo thinks you're doing this just to ease your own conscience, not only will he refuse to forgive you, but so will I, she warned, her gaze serious. Miguel nodded, feeling the gravity of what was to come. He knew Gustavo wouldn't be easily convinced, but he was determined to try. Days later, they met in a quiet restaurant, away from prying eyes. Gustavo arrived promptly, and the tension in the air was palpable. He looked at Miguel with a mixture of disdain and pain, as if staring at the man responsible for everything he had lost. Miguel offered a handshake, which Gustavo ignored, keeping his arms crossed as he sat down. After a few moments of uncomfortable silence, Miguel took a deep breath and began. Gustavo, I know I've wronged you and your family. I never realized the impact of my actions until recently. I'm here because I want to make amends as much as I can, and most importantly, to apologize. Gustavo let out a bitter laugh, as if those words were nowhere near enough to address the damage done. Make amends? You think you can make up for what you took from us, Miguel? My mother's health, years of our lives, the way my family was torn apart because of an impersonal decision on your part. He fired back, his voice filled with resentment. Miguel remained calm, though Gustavo's words stung deeply. He knew it would be difficult, but he was prepared to hear whatever Gustavo had to say. I know that nothing I say can change the past. I don't expect you to forgive me or to see me differently, Gustavo, but I want to do something to help, to ensure other families don't go through what yours did, Miguel explained, controlling his own voice. Gustavo eyed him, still skeptical, but he sensed a genuine remorse in Miguel's words. He didn't want to believe it, yet something within him hesitated to dismiss what the businessman was saying. After a few moments of silence, Gustavo sighed deeply and, almost as a challenge, suggested, if you really want to help, then prove it. Start something that makes a difference for people like my family, small businesses struggling to survive. Support small enterprises without expecting anything in return. Maybe then, and only then, I'll believe you've changed. Miguel nodded, seeing in Gustavo's request a real opportunity for redemption. He knew this path wouldn't be easy and would demand more than mere donations or investments, but he was willing to do whatever it took. In the days that followed, Miguel and Gustavo began working together on a project designed to support local small business owners. Gustavo maintained a skeptical stance, watching Miguel's every move, and their relationship was tense and filled with distrust. However, the project began to take shape, and Miguel started devoting time and resources to turn it into a real, effective initiative. Camila observed from a distance, cautiously watching the tentative reconnection between Miguel and her brother. Gradually, she noticed that Miguel wasn't merely trying to patch up the past, but was genuinely working to build something meaningful. Gustavo, despite his lingering distrust, started to recognize Miguel's dedication and was surprised by the determination with which he poured himself into the project. The first step toward change had been taken. Though the wounds of the past remained, something new was emerging. Gustavo, still carrying his pain, began to see a different version of Miguel, someone who finally understood the responsibility that came with his power. And by the end of that first month working together, both men knew this journey wasn't just about repairing the past, but about creating something that could truly make a difference for many. The relationship between Miguel and Gustavo grew more fluid each day, though still marked by a tension they both seemed to understand as part of the process. The project supporting local small business owners was now in its implementation phase, beginning to attract attention and take shape. For Miguel, this experience was transformative. He was not only financially committed, but also personally invested in each story, in each small business fighting to survive. Camila, on the other hand, watched everything with cautious silence. She saw Miguel's efforts, but doubts lingered. In her mind, Miguel's change remained an enigma, something she wasn't sure if she should trust or embrace. Yet little by little, the sincerity of his actions began to chip away at her resistance, making room for feelings she was reluctant to acknowledge. One Sunday afternoon, as Gustavo and Miguel discussed project details, Camila joined them, bringing coffee. It was an unusual scene, and the three of them felt the strangeness of that moment, almost as if they were starting to resemble a family. Camila exchanged a glance with Gustavo, who surprised her with a discreet smile, a gesture of camaraderie she hadn't seen from him in a long time. "You know, Miguel," Gustavo began after a sip of coffee, "when you first came up with this idea, I didn't believe you were genuinely willing to follow through with it. But I see you've been making a real effort, and while I still have my doubts, I have to admit I'm starting to see your commitment." Miguel nodded, taking in Gustavo's words. For him, this was more than simple approval. It was the beginning of the forgiveness he so desperately sought. "Thank you, Gustavo. I know words don't change the past, but I'm here to prove with actions that I can make a difference," Miguel replied, feeling that he was finally building a sincere connection. In the days that followed, the project began to show results. Small local businesses started to recover with the support offered by the initiative, and the transformation didn't go unnoticed in the city. For the first time, Miguel felt that his power and wealth were being used for something more meaningful than accumulating riches. They were helping to build dreams and restore lives. Camilla's presence by his side, even if still hesitant, symbolized to him that his actions were also impacting their marriage. She began to participate more in the discussions, taking an interest in the details and offering her own suggestions, something Miguel hadn't expected, but which filled him with hope. Camila still carried her share of pain, but she saw that Miguel was dedicating himself wholeheartedly to the project, in a way that felt genuine and that began to soften the barriers between them. One night, after an intense meeting about the project's future, Camila and Miguel found themselves alone in the room. She observed him in silence, as if trying to see beyond the arrogant, distant figure he once was. Finally, she broke the silence with an unexpected question. "Miguel, are you doing this for the project, for my forgiveness, or for yourself?" The question caught him off guard. Miguel, who had spent so much time reflecting on his transformation, realized he had never put into words what truly motivated him. "I think I'm doing this for all those reasons, Camila. For so long, I saw myself as invincible, as if my power made me immune to consequences. But now, seeing you and hearing Gustavo, I realize I need this change to become a better person, to live a life that truly makes sense." Camila felt the sincerity in his words, and for the first time, she allowed herself to consider letting go of her pain to make room for something new. Though still cautious, she imagined a future where Miguel could truly become the man he was striving to be. That night, for the first time, Miguel and Camila shared a deep and honest conversation, free of masks or resentment. It was as if, for a few minutes, all the barriers between them had fallen, revealing a connection they had never experienced before. They were building little by little, something that might someday turn into a true relationship. The project, Miguel's redemption, and the beginning of a new phase for them were intertwined, and both knew that this journey was far from over. Days turned into weeks, and Miguel was deeply immersed in the project, which now gained momentum and expanded to support more local entrepreneurs. The impact of the initiative was undeniable. Small businesses were rising again, and stories of struggle were becoming tales of triumph. Miguel saw firsthand the joy and relief of those he helped, giving him a sense of purpose he had never imagined finding. Gustavo, who had initially approached Miguel with distrust, was now his partner in the project's execution. Working together, the two developed a genuine bond. Miguel not only dedicated himself to the work, but also listened to Gustavo's advice and suggestions with respect and openness. Recognizing that Camila's brother had an authentic vision of how the project should be managed. This unexpected partnership also brought Gustavo and Camila closer, re-establishing a bond of trust and support that time and hardships had once broken. Camila watched Miguel's transformation with a mix of surprise and admiration. He was different, not just in his actions, but also in his outlook on life. The man who once sought only success and recognition now seemed genuinely committed to making a positive impact. Gradually, Camila began to believe in the authenticity of his transformation and allowed herself to feel, once again, emotions that had long been suppressed by resentment. One evening, after a successful meeting with the project's supporters, Miguel decided to open his heart to Camila. They stood on the mansion's balcony, with the tranquil night sky illuminated by stars. Miguel looked at her with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. "Camila, I know our marriage began in an unusual way, and I wasn't the man you deserved. But I want you to know that every change I made, every step I took in this project, was an effort to become someone worthy of you." Camila moved, looked at him in silence for a moment. She could feel the love in his words, but also recognized the sincerity in his remorse. "Miguel, I admit I see your transformation. And despite everything, I feel that you've changed in ways I never expected. But what matters most to me is that you're doing this for yourself, not just to please me. That is what makes this change real." Miguel smiled, feeling a relief he hadn't experienced in a long time. He took her hand, and for the first time since their marriage began, Camila didn't resist. That simple touch marked a new phase between them, one where forgiveness and trust were the foundations of a genuine relationship. Over time, Miguel and Camila decided they no longer needed the agreement they'd made at the beginning. The bet with Artur no longer mattered. What mattered now was the genuine feeling that had developed between them. The contract, once a symbol of their distance, was finally set aside, symbolizing the true commitment they were building. Miguel's relationship with Gustavo also solidified. The project had grown into a significant resource for small businesses, and the two shared a vision of continuous growth. Gustavo, who had once harbored deep resentment, now saw in Miguel not just a brother-in-law, but a true partner and, in a way, a friend. For the first time, Miguel felt he had found purpose in his life. He had left behind the selfish, empty man he once was, transforming into someone who genuinely contributed to something greater. And standing beside Camila, he realized that despite the mistakes of his past, it was possible to start anew and build a new story. This chapter of their lives was no longer about bets or agreements, but about a true partnership and the desire to move forward together, overcoming the shadows of the past and looking to the future with hope. Months had passed since Miguel and Camila left behind their initial contract and embraced a life together built on the trust and respect they had forged. Miguel's transformation was remarkable, and the small business support project had grown beyond what he and Gustavo had ever imagined. Now fully dedicated to this new venture, Miguel felt he was finally using his resources to create something lasting and meaningful. One sunny morning, Camila woke up with a strange feeling. She had noticed changes in her body over the past few weeks, and after much thought decided to take a pregnancy test. The positive result confirmed her suspicions. Stunned and emotional, Camila realized she was about to enter a new chapter of her life. She and Miguel were expecting a child. Later that day, Camila found Miguel in his office reviewing project documents. He looked up as she approached, noticing something different in her expression. Concerned, he walked over to her and gently took her hand. "Camila, is everything okay?" he asked, searching her eyes. She smiled, feeling the emotion well up in her eyes. "Miguel, I'm pregnant." For a moment, Miguel was silent, processing the news. He felt a mix of surprise, joy, and a wave of emotion so intense he struggled to find words. Pulling Camila close, he embraced her tightly, holding her as if she were his greatest treasure. "Camila, this is incredible," he whispered, his voice filled with emotion. "A child. We're going to build a family together." The impending arrival of their baby gave them both a new perspective. They knew that now they weren't just rebuilding their lives and facing the past. They were creating a future for the next generation. Together, Camila and Miguel dedicated themselves to creating a home that reflected the values they had discovered along their journey. With Gustavo and Alice by their side, the couple found unconditional support. Gustavo, now close to his brother-in-law, promised to be there for his nephew or niece, determined to ensure this new family wouldn't face the same struggles of the past. Alice, always a friend and confidant, supported Camila through the emotional challenges of pregnancy, reassuring her that they were all there to build a solid, loving foundation. As the months passed, Miguel and Camila grew even closer. Miguel devoted himself to the project with renewed purpose, knowing his child would be born into a world where he was contributing to the well-being of other families. Camila, in turn, found in Miguel a partner she could now fully trust, a man who had proven to her that true change was possible. On the eve of their child's birth, Miguel reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. He remembered the mistakes of his past, the pain he had caused, but also felt pride in the transformation that had become real with Camila by his side. He knew that the love and respect he felt for her were the foundations of a new life about to begin. When their baby was finally born, Miguel and Camila were overwhelmed by an indescribable love. They looked at the child in their arms, and at that moment, all the shadows of the past disappeared, replaced by a future filled with hope. Together, Miguel, Camila, and their child began a new chapter, leaving behind the pain, the bets, and the contracts, and focusing on building a different kind of family, one that would carry the values of compassion, renewal, and love they had learned together. And that was the emotional journey of Miguel and Camila. We saw how love, regret, and the desire to change can truly transform someone. If you enjoyed this story of redemption and overcoming challenges, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any new updates here. Now, we want to know your opinion. Do you think Miguel's transformation was truly sincere, or should Camila have kept her guard up a bit longer? Let us know in the comments what you think. Your input is very important and helps enrich the discussion about this journey filled with so many ups and downs. And stay tuned to our channel for more heartwarming stories like this one. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.